Hello, I am Alhamgir and this is Taka to Taka, the music of discontent. In this episode, I will explore the music of discontent in Bangladeshi music at times of turmoil and the connection between politics and music. Of course, we can't go through all the protest music and all political and social uprisings in the country, but we try to unpack a handful of music produced in the most critical eras in Bangladesh. Just a note that I am quite new to learning Bangla. I hope I pronounce the names of the songs, artists, and terms properly. Imagine you lived in Dhaka, Bangladesh in 1975. 4 years after your country has declared independence from Pakistan after a bloody war of 9 months. Then, as if the war wasn't enough, famine hit your country. In all this chaos, you hear a song that is different from all the music you have heard before made in Bangladesh. Jare Chaire by Azam. Your anger, grief, and anxiety find a place to be released. সে থাকে মোরি অন্তরে আমি যারে চাই রে সে থাকে মোরি অন্তরে আমি তারে পেও হারাই রে আমি তারে পেও Azam Khan, the legendary Bangladeshi rock star, defined what we now know as Bangla rock. The rock star was more than a musician. He was a fighter for freedom during the Bangladeshi independence war against Pakistan, or as Bangladeshi people would refer to it, the Liberation War. The rock guru, together with his band Orator, was most of the time chased by the police after inspiring revolutionary performances in factories and among labor unions from 1968 leading up to 1971. To understand the importance of early Bangla rock and rock and roll, we should first understand the political and cultural context of the country. So, you see, Bangladesh has historically been a part of India, and India is a complex place culturally. Way before the British Empire entered this vast place, there were Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and Parsis, who were Zoroastrians who migrated from Persia around a millennium ago, living in the areas from present-day Bangladesh to present-day Pakistan as a part of a single land called Hind, Hindustan, or later India. Once the British Empire entered this place, they started naming and separating different parts. Then, this place began to be known as British India, which is the sections in present-day India plus Bangladesh and Pakistan. After colonial times, Bangladesh changed a couple of names. First, in 1947, Bengal, which was a part of British India, was divided into 2 separate regions. One was East Bengal, a Muslim-majority region, and the other West Bengal, mainly Hindus, which was and still is a state in India. Due to the partition, many areas in East Bengal joined Pakistan on the basis of shared religion. Then, in 1955, East Bengal's name was changed again to East Pakistan and was ruled by the Pakistani government. Finally, in 1971, independence from Pakistan happened and the name of the place was changed again, this time to Bangladesh. There are various narratives around the partition of India and Bangladesh's separation from Pakistan. One is the narrative of irreconcilable differences. In the years leading up to the partition in 1947, Muslims and Hindus living in different parts of British India wanted their own country. This led to the establishment of 3 regions, India with mainly Hindus, East Pakistan and Pakistan populated with Muslims. East Pakistan and Pakistan were joined together based on sharing Islam as a religion. But the problem was that the cultural differences between these 2 places were so much more than their similarities. The only thing connecting them was religion, Islam. Ironically enough, even in practicing Islam, they were again different. Islam in East Pakistan was more of a Sufi-inclined one. On the other hand, in Pakistani places like Lahore, Peshawar, and Islamabad, Islamic practice seemed to be more of a political gesture and doctrine.
In the mid and late 1960s, the brutality of Pakistani-led government in East Pakistan led to violent protests and eventually a war between freedom fighters in East Pakistan and Pakistan. The Independence War brought about freedom for Bangladesh as an independent nation for the first time in its history. 3 years after the Independence War, famine struck Bangladeshi people with shock. During this time, the voices of artist-activists like Azam Khan and Fakir Alamgir, a folk singer, became the yearning sounds for freedom and peace. This is why the beginning of rock and roll music in Bangladesh is interwoven with chants for freedom, peace, pain, and loss, and on top of all that, a sense of nationalism. Azam Khan's song Bangladesh and Fakir Alamgir's O Sukaina have become anthems of suffering and pain, even relevant today. One significant feature or aesthetic of Bangla rock and roll was that the artist combined instruments like drums, electric guitars, and synthesizers with Bangladeshi traditional instruments such as dutara, surbahar, and tabla. This was so new to Bangladeshi listeners at the time. Although at this time the rock and roll and rock scene was mostly male-dominated, there were also a few women in the game, like the Huq sisters, Georgina, Sultana, and Roxana. Georgina Huq is a Bangladeshi drummer who rose to fame after a live performance in honor of the independence celebration in 1972. As Muni Mandal, a Bangladeshi writer, mentions, the Huq sisters were brought up in an artistic household. Their brother, Alamgir, was also part and parcel of the Bangladeshi rock and roll music. Georgina, then a 16-year-old girl, appeared on a stage in a sari and immersed herself in a music that was seen as inappropriate for women. To understand the complexity of gender discourse in Bangladesh, we need to have an understanding of the country in the 1970s. Samia Huq, a professor of anthropology at the Brock University, explains how women in different parts of society came to forefront of the narrative of the revolution, change, and nationalism in late 1960s and the early 1970s. Huq argues that women's bodies became a legitimate site of national contestation and representative of nationalist agendas of progress and a better future. Therefore, women were brought to the fore of the political struggle that would give birth to a new nation. Similarly, in the case of Georgina in Bangladesh's rock music scene, having a woman behind the drums went along with the nationalist and progressive ideals of independence seekers in the 1970s, but still frowned upon by the public. But later on, women were pushed back behind the curtains when more conservative Islamist groups came to power. After years, this form of music became a part of the popular music culture in Bangladesh and was identified as yet another mainstream music style in the country. This led some young artists to create alternative music that was influenced by Western metal and alternative rock. Along with the alternative metal scene came the use of psychedelic substances, the use of alcohol, and violence, when some of the young people associated with this form of music got into fights regularly. Underground heavy metal music of this period was different from that of Azam Khan and his contemporary rock and folk artists. This time, The young people were not advocates of nationalist idealism or anti-colonial gestures. The young metalheads of the 1990s Bangladesh were overwhelmed by such idealist notions and instead found the underground to shout out their frustration, anger, emotions, and love. As the country became more conservative under Islamist governments in the 1980s and 1990s, any display of Western culture became frowned upon. Being associated with the metal scene was seen as inappropriate and rather dangerous by families, practicing Muslims, and even established popular musicians. This is similar to the Iranian heavy metal underground culture in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Iranian authorities and news media usually use heavy metal music synonymously with Satanism, and artists involved in underground metal scene and its subgenres have constantly been walking on eggshells. They could quickly be jailed and sentenced for blasphemy, disturbing public opinion through music, and anti-Islamic statements. Bangladesh's underground heavy metal scene also had similar reactions from the authorities and more conservative communities. By the late 1990s, being a part of the underground metal scene became an indicator of rebellion against sociocultural norms, the commercialized music industry in the country, class distinctions, and, at points, political issues. In a conversation with Andrew Bansal, who is a record label owner, music reviewer, and band manager, among other occupations, members of the Orator, a death thrash metal band based in Khadga, explained that their song lyrics criticize the dogmatic religious practices and mainstream socio-political climate, and intentionally and provocatively blasphemous. Having said that, many of the heavy metal bands in Bangladesh do not expressively attack the government or religious beliefs. They simply try to make a music career out of their practice. But this is not an easy task. According to Shams bin Qadir, a cultural studies researcher, the artists involved in Bangladeshi underground heavy metal music do not make money from their musical practice. In many cases, they don't even expect to make any money from it. Many have day jobs from which they can afford to make the music they want. For these artists to secure a future in the music industry, one way is to make sure their content is not bluntly political or culturally offensive to the public. And it means constant, overwhelming self-censorship. Like many music cultures around the world, the resistant music subcultures in Bangladesh are also predominantly male-centric. But this does not mean that women were not present in the scene. By the early 2000s, there were women in pop, rock, and folk metal scenes who are still influential artists in Bangladesh. Someone like Tishma, who is called by fans the Rock Rajkona, meaning rock princess. Interestingly, after a while, most of the women in the popular music scene in Bangladesh merged into the mainstream pop or baul and Sufi-inspired music, especially rock pop, folk metal, and folk rock subgenres. Sharmin Sultana Shumi, the founder and lead singer of the band Chirkuti, is known to be one of the pioneers of pop rock women artists. Or Anusheh Anadil, the lead singer of the folk rock band Bangla, is one of the pioneers of folk rock artists.
নামাজ আমার হইল না আদায় আল্লাহ নামাজ আমার হইল না আদায় নামাজ আমি পড়তে পারলাম না নামাজ আমি পড়তে পারলাম না দারুণ খান্নাসের দায় নামাজ আমার হইল না আদায় আল্লাহ
One significant reason for this is that Nazrul and Tagore music and generally folk fusion music are still the most favorable forms of music in the country. Also, underground artists, especially women, do not get much financial support to produce their work and survive in the scene. It is noticeable that most of the women active in both mainstream and underground resistance music in Bangladesh come from upper middle class and musical families. Samia Huq suggests that one reason for this is that the upper middle class families in the country were more open to their girls practicing music. Also, many of these active musicians come from families with decades, if not centuries, of musical heritage. For instance, both Georgina Huq and Anusheh Anadil come from a rich history of political resistance against colonialism and Pakistani-led governments and music. We are now at the threshold of the 21st century. The next episode will focus mainly on the developments of resistance music in Bangladesh in the last 24 years. Thank you for being on this journey with me.